Okay, in this screencast we're going to begin looking at editing in edit mode and doing some basic modeling using subdivision and grabbing different parts of the shape so that you can end up making a more complex shape that you are trying to generate. First thing that you want to do, of course, is hit Tab to go into edit mode, and you'll notice that everything defaults to being selected. So if you hit the A key, you can unselect all. It's a good starting point. Now down here you'll notice that the select mode they are available as buttons. You can select vertex mode, edge mode, or face mode. And another way to get to that is to hit Control Tab, which pulls up the same choices. Let's start out by just being in vertex select mode and grabbing a single vertex and grabbing it and just pulling it around a little bit so you can see the way that works. That's grabbing a single point in space that defines our object and transforming it by grabbing it to move it around. And then I'm going to undo that now and do that a slightly better way. It's hard to know exactly where you're moving that point unless you flip your view into front, top, side, something that works so that you can see the exact transform that you're trying to achieve. And then when you're done with that, you can toggle around to a more ortho view that's skewed so that you can see if you ended up roughly in the right area that you want and view it from a few different angles and make sure it looks right. So we can do that with edges, we can also, or with vertices, but we can also do it with edges. So if we switch to edge select mode, you can grab a specific edge and then you can manipulate that in space as well to fine-tune where it lives. So all of that is pretty well and good, except that you can't get too much resolution on this object unless you subdivide it to get some more detail in which to work. I'm going to go ahead and just return us back to our default cube so we can start over and mention a couple things about working with edit mode and planning ahead. Basically, if you go ahead and select in edit mode and grab, say, for example, let's grab one face only. So I'm going to go to face select mode and select a single face, and then hit the W key to subdivide that. Now what this is going to do is give me more vertices and more ways to fine-tune my manipulation of this shape. That worked pretty well, and I could actually go ahead then and grab just this one face here and hit the E key to extrude it out. And as you can see, I added some more definition to my shape by doing that, and I was able to grab a very specific location and make a more complicated shape than just a cube. But the problem is that it had to basically rectify this new vertex that was generated right here as this face was subdivided into four little faces. And because of that, we ended up with new edges, and the new edges generated triangles. Now that's not necessarily a problem unless your vision for the thing that you're trying to create is basically involving lots of four-sided rectangles, which frequently is the case when you're doing things. So let me show you a better way to start out so that we don't end up with too many triangles confusing our geometry too early. Let's go ahead and see if we can undo enough of this to get back to where we were. And instead of grabbing just one face and subdividing it, we are actually going to subdivide the entire thing. So if we hit the W key, we can choose to subdivide. And you'll notice that when I do that, grabbing all faces all at once, that I end up with more squares. So I can subdivide yet again, and you could even do it another time. And by doing that, you end up with a lot of resolution. So if my idea then is to make, say for example, let's do like kind of a goofy, simple robot shape. We'll unselect all and jump into face select mode by hitting Control Tab and choosing face. Then I could grab just the faces that I'm interested in. Let's grab shift clicking here to grab multiple faces with these nice little control points that sit in the middle of the faces. And I can extrude up then by hitting the E key and give myself, for example, say like the neck or the head of that object. And then I can go over and I could grab, say, these over here, and I can extrude those out to the side to make an arm. And I think for me, I like working in a mode on numpad hitting 1 or 3 so that I'm looking directly on the thing, face on or side on. And I'm going to extrude out now and pull out, say, that arm shape, and then do the same thing over here and grab corresponding faces and flip back and extrude out to make two arms. Now we could do the same thing down here to make a couple legs, for example. And again, I like to flip into a mode by hitting numpad 3 or numpad 1, depending on which view you're using, so that you can when you're extruding, you can see exactly what you're doing and how far they're going to go. Selecting usually is a little bit easier if you're in a slightly skewed view, so you can see what you're grabbing exactly, and then you can hit a numpad to pop down to a justified view and extrude down. So you can see that we were able to make this shape and still have nothing but squares that we're dealing with. We don't have any triangles to confuse our geometry if the idea that we had to model was pretty straightforward like this. So I recommend then, when you're working in edit mode in Blender and to make a model, try to keep things subdivided into squares sort of as long as you can in your process. And that's why it helps to have a little sketch at the beginning or some idea roughly of what you're trying to make. Now that we're here, let's look at a couple of things in closing when we're working with specific, grabbing specific points or edges or faces in edit mode. A couple tools that you can use. Again, Control-Tab will let you pick what type of control you're going to grab, a vertex, an edge, or a face. So I switched to vertex right there. G will let you grab that point and move it in space. S will let you scale it, and R will let you rotate it. And sometimes when you're doing rotations especially, it's really nice to limit yourself to a specific axis when you're doing that. And you can do that by just hitting X or Y or Z when you're doing that. I'm going to rotate and say I want that to happen only around the, for example, the Y-axis. And then that vertex now is only spinning around the Y-axis. We couldn't see a whole lot happening there, but let's grab a few so that we can actually see that rotation taking place. So again, R to rotate, and then let's limit it around the Y, and let's try the X-axis. There we go. That lets us actually see. So we're locked right now. We're constrained into spinning or rotating these vertices only around that one axis. Again, E is to extrude. So if you are, let's flop Command Tab over to face select mode and grab a face. And if we wanted to move that out this way into space, we would hit E to extrude out. And the last thing is that W is your hotkey for subdividing. So if I wanted more resolution on this specific face, I could hit W and subdivide, and now all of a sudden I have 4 little faces to grab.